Men, your kid may be on the spectrum and you're not quite sure what to do. If you're a father like me and have questions, maybe you're a puzzled dad too. Welcome to the Puzzled Dads Podcast, where we're cracking the code of autism, one piece at a time. Welcome to the Puzzled Dads Podcast. I am your host, Jamar Whitehurst, and I want to thank you again for joining us today as we have yet another riveting interview with one of my friends. I want to thank everybody who's been supporting us, who's been following, subscribing, been sharing the episodes with others. It really means a lot, and we just appreciate that you're allowing us to share our stories, that you're sharing the stories with others, and hopefully encouraging other dads with children with autism to join in and join in the conversation. Well, you know how I start these episodes, the same way. Nothing has changed. So I'm going to open us in a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we just thank you today. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about what it is to be a dad with a child on the autism spectrum. We know that you know the challenges that we go through. And we just hope that what we share here helps somebody, that it encourages another dad, encourages another mom, encourages an aunt and uncle, a grandparent who they're trying to figure out, how do I support my child, my family, the best way I know how. So guide our conversation. We thank you for this day and we love you. It's in your son Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Well, if you want to reach out to us, remember, you can email us at puzzledads@gmail.com. Subscribe, like on YouTube, so that you can get notifications when a new episode comes out. The handle is Puzzle Dads. Follow us on Facebook, on Instagram, on TikTok now. We are on TikTok. The handle at Puzzle Dads. And then also if you're an audio listener like me, you can check us out on Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Apple Podcasts. Well, I am happy to have my friend who I'll introduce here in a second. But we have a definition of the day. The definition of today's episode is So as puzzle dads, we know we have to have patience. The title of this episode is Fruit of the Spirit. And the two fruits that we're going to focus on is patience and self-control. Disclaimer, I am not an expert on autism, but I am an expert on my son. So while we share our stories and the things that we go through, there may be similarities that you see that we're talking about that you can relate to. Well, I want to introduce a friend of mine. His name is Glynn Cooksey. Met Glynn, it's been maybe about 6-7 years now, somewhere around there,
something
at
like
least
that, yeah.
like 6-7 years. Through church, he sings at a church that I call my cousin church because I go there so many times. We serve on the worship team together. Whenever I'm over there, always have a wonderful time. A man with a beautiful spirit, a beautiful family. His wife Raven also serves on the worship team over at City View Bible Church. And it's just been a joy just having him in my life, and just as we kind of share these experiences and bond and connect, it's been a joy to have him in my life. And so, Glenn, welcome. I appreciate you being here. Why don't you tell the people a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Jamar. I appreciate you asking me to do this. It's a pleasure and an honor. So just to tell you a little bit about who I am, my name is Glynn Cooksey, and I'm married to Raven, and we live in Georgetown, Texas, and we have 3 wonderful kids, Audra, Nolan, and Titus. And we've lived in the Austin area, I guess, about since 2017. So going on 9 years. That's crazy. And we've done a fair bit of moving. We've been on the East Coast for 5 years, but I primarily grew up in Oklahoma and Texas, and my wife grew up in Northwest Arkansas. And so we kind of bring those flavors of life together. And my wife is a physician at Dell Children's Medical Center in Austin. And so I uh, personally, I run a internet marketing business at home, and that gives me a lot of flexibility because I also do a lot of stuff for the kids, and we also live a little out in the country and have a little bit of land, and so there's always something that needs to be done out here. So definitely stay busy, even though my job is not the typical full time job. So um, yeah, that's probably my family and my situation in a nutshell. Any other
Okay.
any questions that come from that?
Tell us a little bit about what you do at the church
Okay.
and how y'all are involved at the church.
Yeah, so I used to be in full-time music and worship ministry, previously about 15 years ago and older, and, um, when we came to, City View, we, joined the worship team there, and, it was actually we joined the church during COVID and right as COVID, like, started, and so
Mm.
like, made we joined the church through a Zoom class. It was really awkward. And then I kind of got involved in helping with the streaming and video stuff before I kind of moved into actually doing the worship and being part of the music side of stuff. And been doing that now, I guess, since about 2021. And yeah, we serve on the worship team almost every week. It's gotten a little more every other week because we went to 3 services, and Michael, our worship pastor, really tries to make sure that we have rest because it can be a really long day on a Sunday now.
Yes. Yes, it can. And you play multiple instruments?
Yeah, I play piano and guitar mostly at church. I'm playing acoustic guitar and singing. So yeah.
Yeah. I just want the people to know a little bit of the information that I
Yeah.
know. It's just I always have fun when we are worshiping together. We always have a good time
Mm,
and vibe off each other, and I always enjoy it. So I want the people to know,
yeah.
you have a deep skill set, a deep love for music. We're connected through you all's worship pastor, Michael J. Jordan. Um, and he's a friend of mine as well. And so it's again, it's always a joy. And I tell the people at City View because some people ask, "Are you a member?" I said, "No, I'm a cousin." A cousin is someone who comes over to the house. They don't live there, but they come over there. And so I say I'm a
Yeah.
cousin because I come over there and I have my home church. So um, tell us about your children on the
Okay.
spectrum, and just give a little background about them.
Yeah. So I said we have 3 kids, Audra, Nolan, and Titus. Audra is 17. She is neurotypical, and like any teenager, she is into all her teenager things, and she's now driving, and um which, like, a lot of people talk about how scary that is. I have not actually been that scared. I guess probably because I was the one who did, the driver's ed for her, and so I was with
Mhm.
her from the beginning. I've felt comfortable with her driving, but she is hardly ever home anymore. um, and then our middle son Nolan is 15, and he is on the autism spectrum, and he currently goes to Benold Middle School here in Georgetown. And our youngest son, Titus, is also on the autism spectrum, and he is 11. Um, he attends Redeemer Lutheran School down in Austin. And just to kind of give you a little bit of perspective on our story with them, um, we moved to, so Nolan was born in 2011. We
Mm.
moved to Virginia Beach when he was 18, 19 months old. And when we moved there, he had only just started making sounds. He was extremely late. There was a potential. He had had a really, he had had fluid in both of his ears. We had to put tubes in his ears, and we thought, oh, that's going to be, a big change, and it didn't really work out. So by the time we're moving, there was a lot of stuff up in the air. um, One of the really cool things, though, was that entire trip as we moved to Virginia Beach, we listened to a live worship recording that we had created at our church. And we listened to that CD. Yes, back in the day of CDs, listen to the CD like on repeat. And by the time we arrived in Virginia Beach, um, it essentially was, if not the first word, but the second or third word that Nolan would say was Jesus, because he would
Wow.
sing, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. And so that was, looking back on it, that's just a really cool experience with him. We did not know, he was on the spectrum at the time. There was, there were some warning signs, but I was trying to keep a really positive attitude about it, and didn't really know much about autism at the time.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm guessing probably a lot of people are in that situation, right? Um, and then I guess it was about a year and a half later, we were we had put him into a Mother's Day Out program where he was going there about 2 days a week. And it was a little tiny church and a little class of about 7 or 8 kids. And he was there for about 2 months. And we were called in one day and asked to pick him up, and told that he couldn't stay in the Mother's Day Out program. And that was because they considered him a danger, not a danger to other kids, but a danger to himself, because he would not always listen and respond to instructions. And he had darted out of the building to go to the playground, and the teacher couldn't control him. He had wandered off several times when they went to the bathroom for bathroom break, and they just decided, well, since his teacher couldn't manage him, that he shouldn't stay. So that kind of triggered the process of, okay, we need to check some stuff out. Um, my wife pulled some strings at the hospital where she was, and we got a pretty quick uh, visit with a pediatric developmental pediatrician. And we went to this visit, and I just kind of assumed this is going to be an introductory visit, going to find out what our questions and issues are, and then we would schedule some sort of assessment. So we go in, we're having this visit, we're there for about an hour, and Nolan had to go to the bathroom. So I took Nolan to the bathroom, and we were in there for 15 minutes while he was going to the bathroom. And I come back to the room, and the doctor was in the middle of already explaining to my wife that Nolan has autism,
Mm.
and had been talking about it for 10 or 15 minutes. And I missed all of that. So I was I was pretty mad, um, that, like, I'm thinking, I was shocked because I had no idea
Yeah.
that if that was coming, that it was going to come today, right?
Yeah.
Um, so I was shocked. I was mad that that conversation didn't really include me. And so there was a lot of emotions. And yeah, to be honest with you, I think that when we got home, I'm not sure that my wife and I even really talked about it. We were just processing, what does this mean? um
Yeah.
the whole uh labels. Do you want to put a label on it? What do how are we going to take this information? What are we going to do with it? What do we need to do for him? Um, so there was a lot of a lot of stuff going through our heads, and this was right around Christmas time, as I recall too. This is a busy time at church and in
Yep.
ministry, and anyway, took it took us a while before we settled that we were going to give ABA therapy a try, and we kind of got our feet wet by doing a kind of summer program, and
Yeah.
it took us that gave us some insight into the process and how it worked, and it went really well. And so we started ABA therapy, and he was, by this time, I didn't say this, I guess he was diagnosed right before his third birthday.
Okay.
And we had we had been utilizing the city or school systems preschool education program for, speech therapy, and he had ended up starting to go to the I guess special ed program for preschool
Hmm.
that happened a few days a week. Um, so we were doing a lot of things like that, and then when it came time for um, kindergarten, I really thought, hey man, this ABA therapy, like from the get go, was super helpful for him,
Yeah.
and we were finding some really good response with him from that, and so we wanted to increase what we were able to do, and if he was going to the school system, there was no way to do that. It would just be, in the evenings at home. And so I found out, they aren't going to send, ABA therapists into the school. They won't allow that.
Yeah.
So we're trying to figure out, well, how can we maximize this? We ended up finding a private school in the area that would allow him to, because the public school said that he was um, doing well enough that he could be in a mainstream classroom, in a regular classroom, but with special ed support. So we thought, well, if they think that, then we can probably do that with our own special ed support with an ABA therapist. So the private school would allow the therapist to come in and shadow him at school. And that worked really well for kindergarten. And then that summer after kindergarten, we moved here to Austin, and
Yeah.
we want it was successful enough that we wanted to keep the same thing going. So we started looking for schools here that we could do that, and we landed at Redeemer Lutheran School down in Austin. It was a little bit of a drive for us, but we felt like it was the best option. And as I mentioned, Titus is still there.
Yeah.
Nolan was there. They only do to eighth grade, and so Nolan was there until last year.
Hmm.
And the school, I mean, the school and the culture at the school is amazing anyway. But and so many of the teachers are just so flexible and helpful with both of the boys and understanding their needs and trying to get in their head, if you will, to help them succeed. Um, and being able to have ABA therapists there to shadow has been super helpful. Now, Nolan had essentially had that almost full time at school throughout all
Yeah.
8 grades. Titus is now, um, he has someone that is there for like 2 hours on Monday and like 2 hours on Friday, just kind of bookending the week and just kind of making sure everything's in order, can answer questions for the teacher or help the teacher with
Yeah.
some things that she may be wondering about. But Titus is doing great. And we're actually considering maybe we don't need to be driving an hour to school every day
Yeah.
if he isn't going to have ABA support. But we love the school so much; it's a hard
Yeah.
decision. So we're not sure what we're going to do there yet. But
Well, it's,
so that's go ahead.
oh no, finish your thought.
Oh, I was just going to say, so that's basically a lot of Nolan's story there. I was going to
Mhm.
tell you a little about Titus, but were you going to ask a question or say
Well,
something?
no, as you were talking about Nolan's journey and y'all's journey to figure out, it's very similar to our journey as far
Mm,
as kind of some of the early things and kind of figuring out, what's next, and even getting him into that pre-K program at
Mhm.
school. If it wasn't for the diagnosis, he might not have been able to get that and start getting that um, support from the school district early on. So,
Right.
a lot of similarities that we experience
Mm.
um, from from that initial diagnosis from Nolan. And after you had a chance to process, not necessarily the fact that you weren't in the room, right? But just process that this is what it is. What was that kind of moment, that kind of reaction to where it's starting to settle in that this is what it is?
Yeah, it it did take a while. Um, I would say it took me several weeks for sure before I kinda landed in a spot. Um, Wavered a lot with a lot of thoughts and wonderings. Um, I mean, I guess that's not true. I still have wonderings, right?
Yeah.
Still
Yep.
wonder about the future. But when it came to this, I think, I came to the spot where I I don't know what the world or our culture is at now as far as the labels go. I know that
Hmm.
for sure back then there was a big push, "Don't label my kid." And I actually got to a spot where I was like, "No, I actually like the label because
Hmm.
it puts context.
Yeah.
I can tell you that my son is on the autism spectrum, and that gives you a framework to know and understand why he is different. Maybe not all the details about how
Hmm.
he is different, but it gives you a framework, right? And I got to the spot where if if somebody else I knew had a kid on the autism spectrum, I would find it super helpful if they told me that that label was there, right?
Yeah.
Um, so to me, I found the label to be super helpful. It very quickly and easily puts a framework for how someone might want to handle your kid. Um,
Yeah.
and I, because I think that there's a lot of ways that we've discovered where that has been super helpful, where you can just say that and people are like, oh, okay. And many people
Yeah.
nowadays, I think, at least have, especially if they're in some sort of uh, early childhood work of any kind, most of them have some sort of framework or they know somebody who has a kid on the spectrum. And so
Yeah.
there's something to go from there. Yeah.
It's not like back in the day where, at church they said, "Oh, he or she, they're just special," right? They don't
Right.
define, they don't, and it's one of those things where they just didn't, like you said, they didn't have a definition of what special was, right? Autism doesn't necessarily have a look to it as, say, syndrome or some sort of
Mhm.
physical disability. Um, I think as parents and people who parents of children with autism, people who work with people with autism, you see certain things, but as you know, every person, every child is different. So it doesn't,
Yeah.
it looks similar, but not all the same. And so I think that's a good, call out of it's okay for the label because it puts that context around what people are seeing. So people aren't nervous or how do I interact, versus, hey, no, this is what it is. Now, if you have questions, I'll feel free to answer them.
Hmm.
But it definitely opens the door to kind of give context. So that there's not that awkward elephant in the room of how do I interact with this child? How do I
Right.
interact with this person?
This
They're
kid's doing
different.
some really weird stuff, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Um, I I think that the other thing that helped me come to that too, like I understand the don't label my kid
Hmm.
when there is a possibility as they grow that maybe it isn't, maybe whatever it is, that it isn't, I don't know, noticeable. They grow out of it. They grow to a place where, it isn't as obvious. And I'm talking outside of autism.
Yeah.
And there may be some kids on the spectrum that fit that category too. But I think for Nolan and even Titus, I think that I realized that at least for them, there's a lot that can change and a lot that can, for lack of a better term, get better.
Yeah.
Um, but they're always going to, this is not something that they're going to grow out of, that it's going to magically change and disappear. This is going to be with them the rest of their life. And
Yeah.
so how do I help? How do I help them? Like, and part of that was also part of this label understanding was at some point we have to talk to them about it, right? So they
Yeah.
understand. Now, it isn't a limiting label, it's a context label.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. And so it really kind of cool going along with that. Um, so Nolan started at Redeemer in first grade. Second grade, he had the most amazing teacher in the world, and I will stand by that hands down. She's now the principal of the school, but she
Yeah.
ended up being both boys' second grade teacher, and
Okay.
she was just amazing. And I think we were 2 months into second grade, and she came to us. She said, um, if you guys are okay with it, I would really like to get all of second grade together and have an autism day where
Mm.
we talk to all of the second graders about autism. Like, what is it? Why does Nolan or Titus have a helper? Um, um, why why does he call out in class? Why do these different things happen? Well, it's because he has autism. They were able to show a video on YouTube, and to all the kids, and it really gave a lot of the kids a lot of understanding about
Mhm.
why Nolan was different, and some clues as to what you can do to help Nolan.
Yeah.
How can you be a help to Nolan? And one reason she wanted to do that was she said, a lot of these kids are going to be with him his entire time here. And so I want to
Yeah.
give them clues as to how they can help and not just go, oh, he's that kid with a helper, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so that was super helpful, super successful. And the same thing ended up happening with Titus. And another like interesting, cool story with that was we kind of opened a door for the school and for a few other families through Titus's ABA therapy company. Um, they told some other families about the opportunity when kids were going to be going to school. They said, well, there's a school over here that'll allow us to shadow your kid. And the school, said we're only going to allow one kid per class. But
Yeah.
I think at one time there were four students on the spectrum attending that school that had ABA therapists,
Wow.
with them for at least part of the day. So anyway, it was really cool to kind of know that we were kind of breaking some ground here and there as we went.
It it's always great to have when you have that support, especially in the school system, right? Because you're always worried as a parent: are they going to treat our kids the right way? Are they going to, not just kind of have them over to the side? And so it's great to hear that they had that support. And even the Autism Day, I think every school should do that. Um, just to allow the kids in that class to be able to understand a little bit more about what it is, but to your point, how they can help, that particular student. So,
Hmm.
um, so let's go back. So we talked about Nolan's story, and you
Hmm.
mentioned Titus. So let's talk about Titus's story as far as how he came up, and then to when you all got the diagnosis for him.
So because of Nolan's story, and when Raven became pregnant and we found out it was a boy, obviously all of the kind of uh, alert flags went up. Okay, we
Mm.
need to be on the watch. And um, so this, because he was born when Nolan was 4, so we
Mhm.
weren't even really into our journey very far, right?
Yeah.
Um, but we started watching, and there were some early signs. He hit all of the milestones, but
Mhm.
they were all just slightly late. Like the one I remember is like they're supposed to make eye contact by 12 weeks, right?
Yeah.
Well, he made eye contact at 13 weeks. And you're just like, it's like there were things like that that kind of were cluing us in. And even though he then made eye contact, the eye contact thing was always a little awkward.
Yeah.
And so, anyway, after we moved here, we felt pretty comfortable. He was 2.5 at the time, but we felt pretty comfortable going, yeah, we think he's on the spectrum. And if that's the case, we want to get him the assistance he needs as soon as we can. And so we immediately sought out um, someone to be able to do a diagnosis for him. And it was really kind of funny. I remember talking to the doctor, and he said, well, we got the results from your assessment, and he's really kind of, he's 2.5, he's not 3 yet, and we don't really like to diagnose until they hit 3 because there can be these question marks, and we don't want to put a label on them too early that isn't appropriate and this sort of thing. And we basically looked at him and said, if you think he might have autism, just give us the diagnosis. And he's like, what? Most people aren't that way. So, well, he's got a brother that's on the spectrum, and we know that if he is gonna, need some help, this is the way to get the help. So let's
Yeah.
just do it. We don't, I don't care about the label. Let's just do it. So that's how we kind of ended up with it with Titus. It was uh strange and interesting. We had started with a therapy company for Nolan, and our assumption was we'll just go deal with the same company. And it turned out the company that did his assessment reached out and they said, we'd love to have Titus here. And they were just starting out. They had
Mhm.
one little center. They had some really kind of strict rules on how they did it, but we really liked the people, and so we went that direction with him. And now that company has exploded. They're all over Texas, and they have been bought out like 3 times, and they are no longer the company that they were.
Yeah.
And in not a great way. I'm not going to say the company name, but it was it was good for him. But then they got to a point where they said, yeah, we pushed their boundaries, and they went from being center only to sending a therapist to the school with him. So we opened the doors for the company to do that. And when they started doing that, right, with other clients. And
Mhm.
then they got bought out, and they got bought out again, and other structures got put in place, and they ended up shutting that down. And so
Yeah.
Titus was the first person with a therapist in a school or outside of the school. And he was the last with a therapist outside of school. And they finally came to us. And instead of saying, we're not doing this anymore, they said, we don't think he needs any assistance at school anymore. So we're just going to discontinue services. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But it was a God thing, I would say, because I think that um, things were okay with them. But when we
Mhm.
were able to move and we actually were able to put Titus and Nolan under the same um, BCBA, it helped things a lot. Like there was a lot of, you know, the same person was assimilating both teams, and leading both teams and could help them, help both boys together. And so it was a really good move. Yeah.
Yeah, ABA therapy is great. So I'm gonna start there. Um, it's great. There can be fluctuations, whether it's personnel or things like you talked about, that
For
can
sure.
make it challenging, right? And because for the most part, the therapists are great. The BCBAs are great with coming up with a plan. One thing people may want to who may watch this understand is there can be a high turnover rate with therapists. Because you get younger therapists who are getting into the role,
Mm-hmm.
um, and that's the ironic thing about ABA therapy to where and people, this is not me complaining about it because I think it is helpful and great for our children. But I think as a parent, it's challenging when what we learn about autism is autistic children and people are about routine and doing the same thing over and over. And yes, there's an aspect of ABA therapy that helps them to adapt to change, but the change within therapists within if it's
Mm,
a 3 to 5 month period, it's tough, right? And makes it
yes,
tough for our kids. So that'd be my only thing to
that's a
say.
really
I'm
good
not gonna
point.
say gripe, but for the most part, it's great. But some of these challenges and changes they wear on our kids because the goal is for them to adapt to changing situations. But some of
Hmm.
these larger changes, it's like, will you all think about the kids when you're making some of these changes or what have you? So,
Right.
um, that's
Well,
my
and I'm
2 minute
speaking a
rant on
lot
that.
about it,
Yeah,
but I also recognize that not everybody is
yeah,
necessarily on board with ABA therapy. We are, but
yes,
I recognize that not everybody is. Um, we we were super blessed. I would say Nolan's first BCBA when we were in Virginia was incredible.
yeah,
Um, she admitted in certain circumstances, I don't know what the best thing to do here is, but I'm going to find out. And she
yeah.
contacted her professor from Florida State University that she knew, who was coming into town, and they like created a special session for them to get together and for her to, figure out some of the challenging aspects of things. We moved here, and
Hmm.
our first BCBA that we had her for 3 or 4 years,
That's
and
good.
she was okay to good. But
Hmm.
we always kind of struggled and felt like, man, I guess we were spoiled with our first one, is kind of what we thought.
Yeah.
But we finally got to a spot where we just asked our company, said, can we have a new BCBA? And we were also incredibly blessed at that time. I think all of the RBTs that were with Nolan, I,
Hmm.
I think he had like three, and I'm pretty sure all three of them had been with him for like 3 years, which you're right, is pretty incredible, and not that common. And we've kind of experienced that as we've gone further down the road with it. But we asked for a change in BCBA, and
Hmm.
it was it kind of was working, and then that young lady ended up moving, and she had been one of his RBTs for all
Hmm.
these years, and she was getting her BCBA, and so she was going to transition into that role. And she did that for a little while, and then she moved back to the East Coast, and we were kind of in that spot where we were like, my gosh, like we asked for a change, but now we've got this change and this change, and it just seemed like, and who are we going to get? Like
Yeah.
we were really worried at that point because we thought we knew who we had,
Yeah.
and now it's changing. They assigned a new BCBA who was with Nolan until last year. He was with him for 4 years as well. And he was just as incredible as
Yeah.
the first lady we had. And he was just amazing. And he left and went to a new company, is doing some different kind of stuff. But I would say we have been very blessed and lucky that on the BCBA side, it's actually, other than that one little jaunt, was pretty consistent. And even the RBTs have been fairly consistent.
Hmm.
Um, but there has been some times where it's been a little upheaval. I would also say it has been helpful for us because I don't think that either of our boys, that they the change for them has never been a super, like, uncomfortable or hard thing for them. So,
That's good.
yeah.
Yeah, it's you know, like you said, like it was good for us, and I know everybody has different um opinions on ABA therapy. But also to your point is as parents, especially parents that have young kids and just getting into ABA, that again, we're going to always be advocates for our children. So if something's not working, you bring it up. And so if
Yeah.
that could be a therapist is not working, we've had to have that conversation too. So, um, all right. So I want to shift the conversation just a little bit.
Okay.
Um, so how do you think this experience with your boys um, has affected your walk with God and affected your ministry?
Um, I'm going to go back to your definition of the day, um, because I don't know if this really answers it right off the bat or not, but, and you brought up that word, and that is the place where I feel like I have the biggest deficit. Um, and I struggle with it every day. Some days are better,
Hmm.
some days are worse. And ironically, that's also just like a lot of other things, I guess, in life. It's like my walk with the Lord, right?
Yeah.
Some days it's good, some days it's not so good. And ironically, those two things probably um, are are in sync together, right? Um, Ministry, I think, for me, where the tough area of that for me is that I I felt called to full time ministry when I was in eighth grade
Hmm.
and pursued that as my planned vocation, and was doing that full time until we moved to Virginia. And it didn't stop because I didn't want to or because of even this, but it stopped. Let's be real, because that's what the Lord wanted.
Hmm.
And I was working, I worked for a church part time, assisting in the worship ministry. When we moved to Austin, I worked part time for a couple of years at a church in worship and music. And that has personally always been a struggle for me because, right, wrong, or indifferent, I have believed that that was an identity for me, and that it was who I was. I am Glynn Cooksey. I'm a worship pastor. And that's so getting through. I would say that only in the last couple of years. So we're talking over a decade into that not being a full time vocation for me.
Yeah.
Um, I went to a family camp 2 summers ago, and they had us the first day when the adults were in the room, stand up, tell us a little bit about yourself. You know, your name, what your job is, whatever. And that was the first time ever that when I stood up, I said, I'm Glynn Cooksey and I own my own internet marketing business that I work from home, and didn't say anything about worship and music ministry.
Wow.
And I literally told myself in that moment, you're not going to do that. You're not going to say that because that's not, that's not who you are. And so it um it is not as tough as it was. I think that I
Mhm.
have um come to terms is not a good way to say it, but like I rest easy in the fact that if God wants that to happen again, he'll make it happen, and I'm okay with that. But if he doesn't,
Yeah.
I'm okay with that. Um I am happy with what he has blessed me with. He has blessed me with a situation where I don't have to have a full-time job, where I can be present with my kids when I need to be. Although my 17-year-old sometimes gets the deficit on that. The neurotypical one, right?
Yeah.
Um, so I'm blessed in so many ways that to wrap myself up in an identity that A doesn't really exist anymore because I wanted it to exist,
Mhm.
and B because I don't need to. Um, like God's blessed me in all these ways. Sorry, my robot vacuum just started going, and I'm
You're
going to
fine.
shut it off here so that it doesn't come in here and make a bunch of noise. Um, and now I don't even know where the app is. I lost it. Sorry. Um,
Thank
but anyway, I think that to me that uh, I don't know. I feel like that kind of is a display of how God has worked in my life.
Mhm.
I was stubborn with it for a long time.
Yeah.
Um, and but I'm at peace with it. And I
Yeah.
love my life. I love my wife. I love my kids. And I'm thankful for how God has blessed me. Where that has been a bad thing is that it means for many years I was wishing and hoping and striving for something that the Lord had said, "Hey, quit trying. I got this."
Yeah.
Right? And I wanted it that I was allowing it to affect who I could be, right?
Yeah.
So, um, that's the downside of it taking so long to get there. But
Yeah, it's it's I tell people good or bad, God has a great sense of humor. Um and sometimes he takes things away from us that we don't understand that we're passionate about. In terms of being a dad with a child, or in your case, children with autism, sometimes it's like you said, freeing up that time and space to give them the attention that they need. As I think about my journey with Jamar and some of the goals and plans that I um, had they come to fruition the way I wanted to, I might not have been as available for him in a lot of these crucial years, um, to just be there, be available, be able to go to school and pick him up if he's having a meltdown, be able to take him to different things or whatever. And like you said, it's a tough pill to swallow because, like, God, you know what's on my heart, and you know what I'm passionate about. Um, and trying to ask the question then, well, God, help me to understand what it is that you're wanting me to do right now. And trying to settle in that is, like you said, is not easy.
yeah,
um and the reason why I chose the title Fruit of the Spirit is because as I've watched you within ministry, um I've seen the patience and self-control, right? And I also understanding that it's not always easy, and it's a journey. And sometimes we want to just snatch our kids up, right? Sometimes we just want to yell out, stop. But at the end of the day, when you have,
sometimes we do.
well, that too, and, when you have children with autism, there are times where we have to catch ourselves.
Yeah.
because how they may react to our neurotypical kids is different, right? And they may take it a totally different way. And so, I, from your standpoint and what you're saying, it's been difficult for you. I'm sharing what I have seen in you and seen, you know, I've seen when you've caught yourself, even if you haven't said it. Right. I've seen where you had to stop, take a deep breath, and communicate in a different way with your boys. Right. I've seen that. And so that's why I chose that. And that takes that self-control, that takes that patience, that if God didn't put that in you, right, you wouldn't have been able to do that. So I want to encourage you in that, because those are things that I've seen that people don't realize. It's not always easy, to be able to do that, especially if it's in the midst of a lot of other things going on and
Yeah.
our kids are doing this, that. Jamar runs around, at church after church, and it's like, wait, we're trying to get a lot is going on. I need you to. So, but I just want to encourage you in that,
Well,
because
thank you.
it can affect how we minister to others, right? And it can make us bring up questions with God, but it can also grow our relationship with Him, um, because sometimes He'll answer and make it clear, and sometimes He won't. And it's when He doesn't that we have to kind of sit back and, all right, God, let me sit back and try to wait. And waiting is hard. So, but I
Yeah.
just want to encourage you in that.
It helps to remember, like, when we read the stories in the Bible, like, think of the story of Moses because it's such a big narrative, right? And
Hmm.
yet you get you get the story, and in your mind, you put it all together and you go,
Yeah.
"Oh, this is Moses' life." And but when you think about really what you got these couple little snippets here. You got one
Yeah.
kind of significant long chunk, but even that, you don't get all the details of Moses' life, right? And
Yeah.
so you literally are getting the high points. And he lived how long he did, right? And you get this little window, and there's all sorts of gaps between those high points. And so, you know, uh, I have to remember the same thing's going to happen with me. Not all my high
Yeah.
points are coming all together, and they're not just going to be high points in a row, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So let me ask this then. So when you have what you would consider low points or bad reactions, um, uh, with your boys or with your children, how do you self reflect and maybe kind of reevaluate how to approach that situation the next time?
um, I think that I one of the things that I try to do if the opportunity is available is I do try to apologize to my kids.
Hmm.
I, and that goes for the 17-year-old neurotypical.
Yeah.
um, when I don't act the way I know I should act, the way Christ would want me to act, I want them to know that I'm cognizant of that. Um, so I try to start there. Um, and usually I can pinpoint exactly what it is that I should have done differently. Um, I probably don't do that enough. And then it's interesting because I think one of the things that has been happening with ABA therapy for Nolan in his teenage years is you moving much more into processing things and how to process things that are happening. And so one of the things that they've tried to do over the last couple of years is to give him bursts of, if this is the situation, let's think about it now. How would I do this?
Hmm.
What would I do? And if you prep yourself, to know how to act in a situation, you're much more likely to act that way. And so there's a lot of, uh, for lack of a better term, programming going in there to say, hey, okay, we had this bad moment without actually saying this, thinking
Yeah.
through it, had this bad moment. Okay, how can we prep Nolan so that he is prepared the next time he enters that to know how to navigate it, right?
Yeah.
And so the same thing is true for us. I mean, almost every single tool that is, I'd probably go as far to say every single tool used in ABA therapy can be used for anybody, not just
Yep.
atypical kids, right? So it that process can be super helpful if you'll take the discipline to do it. And I probably don't take the discipline enough to do that, to think through. And it's probably because I think that the the big moments
Hmm.
are much farther and fewer between than they used to be. So
Yeah.
you've had this sense that I've got a lot of it under control. But what I don't take stock in is the little things.
Yeah.
Like today, I'm driving Titus to school and I'm trying to listen to this podcast. It's on
Hmm.
the Bible. It's on this, you know, super interesting thing to me. And he just starts talking. You know, what's my reaction? My reaction is, what? You know,
Yeah.
and I did that like 4 times. And I think on the fourth time, I'm literally like, why do you do that? Why? What what does that actually produce?
Yeah.
Nothing good, nothing helpful, literally nothing. In him or me, it it doesn't even make me feel better, right?
Yeah.
So, like, why do that? And so it's and that's not even a big thing, but it's something that happens quite often, and yet I never stop, or I rarely ever stop and think, okay, so what am I going to do the next time?
Yeah.
And I haven't thought about that yet. I need to
Yeah.
do that.
And well, and sometimes it's okay, how do I plan that kind of personal reflection time around what do I need to do for my kids? You know, so
Yeah.
I know if I got to pick Jamar up, I know he's going to get in and he's going to ask me, "Hey, can I listen to my music?" Right? And so I figured out ways to negotiate of okay, on the way there we listen to your music. On the way back, we listen to what I want to listen to, right? And those type of things. And
Yeah.
but it's a journey. Would you say that's kind of part of how you've evolved as a dad, or like what are some ways you've evolved as a dad since these diagnoses when they were, toddlers?
Yes, I would say that that is a way that I've evolved. I probably hmm, thinking about the early years. I think when they were young, I still kind of I tried to treat them more like a neurotypical kid,
Hmm.
and a little bit like the idea. I think that I had this in my mind on some level. I remember hearing years ago, like when you have a child, a toddler, that if you want them to act like an adult, you need to treat them like an adult. If you want them to be smart, you need to, don't treat them like a
Yeah.
little tiny kid, but actually treat them like they're older and use words that maybe they don't know. And they'll ask you what those words mean, right? And they'll grow their vocabulary, things like that. And so I think there was some part of me when they were young that I felt like, well, if I treat him just like I treat older sister here or treated
Mm.
her when she was that age, that you know he'll get the same experience. He'll end up, uh, it will benefit him in the long run. And it did take me a while to recognize that that isn't the case. um
Yeah.
he it doesn't matter who your kid is. It doesn't matter if they're neurotypical or not. they're their own kid and they deserve to be treated how they need to be treated and handled. Um, and that's something that I've tried to have that discussion with, my oldest about,
Yeah.
because she often doesn't understand. When I was that age, I didn't get to do that, or when I was that age, you let me do this. How come you don't let him do that? Well, he's not you when you were that age.
Yeah.
And so he gets a different set of parameters. Um,
Yeah.
and he is not going to get the same parameters that you have now when he is 17. Like, it's not going to happen because he is
Yeah.
not, he's a different person. And
Yeah.
it doesn't matter whether he has autism or whether he's neurotypical. He's going to be a different kid and he's going to deserve his own rightful passage when he's ready for those things. Right.
Yeah.
So
How
it took me a while, I think, to get to that point.
how would you say Audra has grown just being the older sister to two younger brothers with autism?
It's interesting because I would say that, like, in the day-to-day activity and what you see at home,
Hmm.
it makes you think, uh, "Oh my gosh, does she even get this? Does she even understand?" Like, it seems like typical brother-sister life, right?
Yeah.
And, but I know that that's not the case because I've seen the glimpses in other situations. For instance, there was a very real thought that where she is going to high school now, that one day Nolan was going to be there with her. It
Mm.
ended up not working out that way, but she knew that. And she's watching this little private high school down in Pflugerville and watching the kids. And she sees kids making fun of a kid who's different. I don't even know
Mm.
how, in what way, but different. I think one of them, a boy in a wheelchair, and like
Yeah.
making fun of him behind his back. And um, it it took her a while. It's funny. She told me how she would stand up for him, and it sounded to me like it was always something to the effect of, "You better not treat Nolan like this when he gets here." Which
Yeah.
is kind of the backhanded way of saying, "You shouldn't be saying this." But
Yeah.
instead of actually confronting what you're saying to him, you're putting it
Yeah.
on, your brother. But
Yeah.
she's willing to call it out, willing to recognize it, and she sees, and um sometimes I've been concerned about whether she has a quote unquote sweet enough heart for her brothers. But there are moments where it shows, and that makes me incredibly grateful. So,
That's good. That's good. You know, Jamar doesn't have any siblings, so but just kind of watching his cousins kind of adapt has been interesting. All right, so we'll wind down here in a little bit, but um, give us, I guess, one of the best stories you have about Nolan, and one of the best stories or best or favorite stories you have that about Titus that gives you the most joy.
oh goodness, the most joy for Nolan. It's actually a little easier for Titus, only because it's encapsulated in a video that we captured
Okay.
when he was like 4 years old. And it gives me great joy because he was so happy. And we were in Hobby Lobby of all places, and it was around Easter time, and he was running around. I don't even remember the background on this, but he would when and I don't know why we're saying this, but he would say chicken wings, but he would
Hmm.
say chicken wings, chicken
Hmm.
wings. And so we got him to saying that, and he's literally running around Hobby Lobby going, chicken wings, chicken wings. And it was just the funniest thing. And he was so happy. And it reminds, like, when every year it came up a few days ago on Facebook,
Yeah.
and just start laughing again every time I see it. Um, for Nolan, uh, Nolan has for a long, long time been super into airplane travel.
Okay.
And I for years he was into airplanes, like not just any airplane though. It had to be airliners. Like he didn't care about military planes and all that
Yeah.
stuff. All he cared about was airliners that you'd fly on. And he had models that he would play with, and he would watch videos of people who made flight videos about different flights. And I mean, he would tell
Yeah.
you all about these different flights that people took and the airports. He knew all the airports around the world, knew their call signs. He could tell you, he could look at a plane and tell you that's a Boeing 737, that's a 787 Dreamliner, that's a, he could tell you all that stuff just because he watched all these videos and that's
Hmm.
what he was into. But there was a part of him that um, he just wanted to fly. And we would fly, but it was always, I don't
Yeah.
know, here in the United States where it's just you're going, to Atlanta or Orlando or wherever. And so they were always doing these short couple hour flights. And 2 summers ago, we got to go to Europe.
Uh-huh.
It was a pretty big deal. And but for him to get to fly on a plane overnight and get to experience the meal on the plane.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it was a total experience to see him just be, you know, well, as excited as Nolan will get because he can also
Yeah.
be crabby about things because it didn't happen the way he expected it to be. But,
Yeah.
um, just to see him on those flights going over there and coming back, and it was just like, I'm not sure, but I think that those were the best parts of the trip. Like he could have taken or left Europe.
Yeah.
So
That's good. Well, I'm gonna get you out of here on this last
okay,
question. What advice would you give to other dads or parents with autistic children?
I I I would say we probably kind of already a little touched on it, but just to summarize, like every kid is different, even if they are on the spectrum or not. They deserve to have their own childhood experience and get the best out of you that they can. They don't need to get the same parent that parents their sibling. Um, I would say that your definition of day. I don't know how you chose that. You said you chose Fruit of the Spirit as the title because of me. I don't think you chose, I have a hard time thinking you chose that word because of me, but you said you kind of did. Um, but man, that is the name of the game, and try it. Oh, it is so hard, but it is so necessary. Um, because like I just explained that story earlier with Titus, like it does nobody any good. Your kid, you, the people surrounding you, does nobody any good to get mad, to
Hmm.
act out physically, verbally. Um, and none of us are ever, but then I would take that a step further and say, none of us are ever going to be that and do that 100% of the time. And you can't beat yourself up when you do. Or
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you can't beat yourself up when you aren't acting and doing the way you should. Um, so always those things, and then I would also just kind of close with saying, um, seek the Lord for what is best for you and your child, and fight for that.
Yeah.
You're the only advocate, or you're the best advocate that your child is going to have. And I'm a people pleaser by nature. And so when I'm in situations where I think that other people think I should do something a certain way or should be a certain way, I have the tendency to just follow along. And I have to fight that within me sometimes for my kid and say, no, this is the way it needs to be. And if it can't be, then we're going to find a different way to do this, a different place or whatever it is. Um,
Yeah,
so
that's good. Be the best advocate for your kid. I
yeah,
love it. Well, my friend Glenn, I appreciate you taking this time. We probably could have gone another hour, hour and a half. And so what that
you
means
know me, I
is
like to
I'll
talk.
have to, hey, well, all that means is I'm gonna have you back for another interview. So another episode. So, but I appreciate your time. Appreciate you telling your story and your journey. And for anybody out there, um, you may be able to relate. All of us have different situations. I have one child. Glenn has three, and he has two on the spectrum, one who's not, right? So there's different journeys that we're all going through. And I hope that this was helpful to you all, that you're able to just relate and listen, but it opens up the conversation for you to be able to have with others. So thank you again for watching the Puzzle Dads podcast. Remember, you can email me at puzzledads@gmail.com. If you want to tell your story, you just got questions. You can catch us on YouTube, subscribe and like so you can get the notification when a new episode is released. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And again, if you're an audio listener, check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and iHeartRadio. Well, thank you all for joining the Puzzle Dads podcast. And remember, Puzzle Dads, we're cracking the code of autism one piece at a time. Have a blessed day, and we'll talk to you later. Bye. I hope you enjoyed listening to the Puzzle Dads podcast with me as your host, Jamar Whitehurst. For more information on autism, check out autismspeaks.org, along with other resources listed on our social media pages. Don't forget to leave a review and follow us on Facebook, YouTube, and subscribe to this podcast on your favorite streaming platforms such as Spotify and Apple Music. Remember, Puzzle Dads, to keep cracking that code because God has a plan for each of us and our children. Have a blessed day.